Hi, I'm Lauren from Access Your Life, which is an online platform encouraging people living with disabilities and their carers to review medical equipment and share their experiences, all of which can help other people living in similar situations to achieve a brighter future. Now, this video is all about our top 10 tips for buying medical equipment. I am going to use wheelchairs as the main example throughout the video. However, you could probably use this advice for mobility scooters, power chairs, and maybe even other equipment. Number one is all about identifying your needs. Now, your physical abilities is far more than just whether you can walk or not. And when buying a wheelchair, you have to consider things such as your posture, your strength, your skin sensitivities, and dexterity. You also have to take into consideration whether your prognosis will change in the future, and if you are carer dependent, what they need to make the wheelchair as comfortable as possible when pushing or transporting it. You can get advice with things like this, especially from the NHS or private physiotherapists and occupational therapists, but it purely comes down to your own preferences. Now that you have established your physical needs, you can move on to assessing your personal preferences, which is number 2 on my list of top tips. Now, if you are unsure, you should start by deciding if you need a manual or powered wheelchair. And if you're debating between the two, consider how you would propel a wheelchair. Would you be able to do this independently? Would you need a carer to help you out? Would you prefer an assisted power pack on the back, or a powered chair with a joystick or something like head controls? You should also consider whether your physical needs will require you to have a specific feature, such as a chair that has elevating leg rests or a rise and tilt function. And finally, do you have any desires? These are just as important as your physical needs. For me, I was adamant to have a bright pink wheelchair. Number 3 is all about practical considerations. Now you've taken the time to think about your physical needs and your preferences, take a moment to think about your lifestyle, your occupation, housing. Do you need a chair that can fit through a really narrow door or over a country park? How are you going to transport it? And how are you going to transfer in and out of it? Do you use a hoist that will have to be compatible with your wheelchair? And finally, going back to your future prognosis, if you have a condition that is going to change, is it worth getting a wheelchair that you can adapt? Now, I have a really unpredictable condition, so finding a chair that I could alter and modify was imperative. Number 4 is your budget. Now, most people know that the cost of a wheelchair is extortionate. However, your wheelchair is your lifeline. It is your way of accessing the world and being independent. So for some people, they know that they are happy and able to go through the NHS wheelchair services, but for others, they prefer to go down the private route. There is no right or wrong answer. It purely comes down to what you prefer and what you are able to afford. If you are more swayed towards the private market, you can look into things such as grants, VAT relief, the NHS voucher scheme, which is really useful, or organisations that can help you fund either part of your wheelchair or all of it. Some examples are Motability, Access to Work, and WizKids. Number 5 is all about research. So you've thought about your physical needs, practical considerations, your preferences, and your budget. You can start looking into what you want and what's available. Some people have a perfect understanding of what they want, the make, the model, where they're going to get it, but other people don't have a clue. I certainly didn't when I was newly diagnosed, and when you're suddenly thrown into the world of medical equipment, it's really overwhelming. So take your time, do your research. Now, you can seek professional advice with this, either from the NHS wheelchair services or an occupational therapist. However, I would strongly advise to do your own research and compare the two results, basically. And finally, read reviews. This will massively help you narrow down your options. And Access Your Life actually has a whole directory of equipment reviews for all kinds of wheelchairs from around the world in every shape, size, model, And this is something that is hugely important. Now people read reviews before buying anything, so why shouldn't we do the same when it comes to a wheelchair, especially if you are going to be paying a lot of money, because there is nothing worse than buying something and then being stuck with something that is completely unusable. Number 6 is shop around. Now, whether you do this online or in store, it is vital that you stick to your guns and you are not encouraged to buy something that is completely incompatible with your needs. Look into whether you can trial the piece of equipment, whether that's at an event, in a showroom, or in your home environment. It is so beneficial to have an opportunity to actually go and test something out, as opposed to reading about it, assuming that it meets your needs, buying it, and then trying it at home and realizing it's not right. Some manufacturers and distributors actually allow customers to buy ex-demo equipment which is nearly new and sold at a considerably lower cost. There are also payment plans available which helps you to spread the cost out over a certain period of time, or look into second-hand. Sometimes people are selling equipment that has barely been used at a ridiculously low price. We actually have a page on our website that is dedicated to facilitating the rehoming of medical equipment. We have had so many people get in touch to say they have a wheelchair that they can no longer use, or it was actually unsuitable upon buying it, and they want to give it to someone else. Now, before ordering your wheelchair, take a moment to double check your measurements. You should never be squeezed into a wheelchair, but then you should also never have so much room that you are not supported or held into position correctly. I strongly advise that you seek professional help with this, whether that is purely getting a set of measurements that you can then use to order online is up to your personal preferences, but it's always advisable to just double check you are doing it correctly. Number 8 is ordering your wheelchair. Whether you are going through the NHS or a private retailer, ask for a copy of your order form. Then if you need to replace a part in the future, or it arrives and it's not as expected, you have proof of what you ordered, the exact measurements, the exact part names, and things like that. Also, expect a delay if you are buying a custom-made chair. This is because the chairs are not kept in a stock room and then just shipped out if they are made to measure. So don't go online or into a store and expect your wheelchair to be delivered tomorrow, unless you are buying kind of a preset chair. Number 9 is service and maintenance. When getting a new wheelchair, you should always consider how you can take care of it. Are you able to fix simple things such as a puncture or a broken brake, or will you need help with that? If so, who can you go to? Now, the NHS have an excellent repair and maintenance service in place, but if you are buying privately, look into local organisations that can help you out, especially if you are using powered equipment, because these things can just pack up at no notice and you will need help. And finally, take the time to regularly check over things, whether you do this yourself, your maintenance team help you, or your carer. Just check that there are no loose nuts and bolts, that your brakes are working, that your tyres are pumped up, little things like that that make a big difference. Number 10 is something we get asked about a lot, and that is insuring your wheelchair. This is certainly not imperative, and in fact it purely comes down to personal preference. However, I strongly advise you look into it if you travel abroad. Now, most typical travel policies do not cover equipment protection, so you can take out wheelchair insurance. However, if you are using this to protect you whilst traveling, make sure it covers any damage that may be done by baggage handlers, because this is where wheelchairs get the most damage. And that is my top 10 tips for buying a wheelchair. Regardless of what you buy, how you fund it, or where you get it from, remember that your wheelchair is a source of independence. It is going to improve your quality of life, and you should not be ashamed to use it. Once you have bought a wheelchair, regardless of whether you like it or not, please go to our website and fill out one of our online review forms so we can then feed the information back to the manufacturers to improve future services and help other potential customers decide whether that wheelchair is right for them. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!